works harder. This guy is a future superstar in the media business.
Keep up the good work, man. I like your style.
You have a gift. And with great power, there must also come great responsibility.
This is the way.
Long have I waited, and now you're coming together.
Welcome to a very special episode here of the John ALLCORN Show, exclusively on the Intergalactic Sports and Entertainment Network. NFL stable, founder and CEO of Athletes in Recovery, go-getter, and truly, if we're being honest, a role model that a lot of people need in the sports world. But Randy, how are we doing today, sir, on this wonderful Thursday morning?
Oh, man, I'm doing great. I'm out here in St. Petersburg, Florida. I live in paradise, and everything is really good. And I appreciate this opportunity. Thank you very much.
For sure. It's definitely, for me, interesting to learn about, like, just your career on and off the field, to learn, hey, I'm Bradley from the 90s. Like, what else can I learn? But more importantly, what can I do for you? But I think what really struck with me, you started a company called Athletes in Recovery. And for people out there that are watching or they've been a fan of your career, like what you've done for athletes off the field, would you be able to kind of go into more detail what the goal and mission is for Athletes in Recovery?
Well, yeah, because when I came into rehab, I was that guy willing to do whatever I had to stay out on the field, and that meant taking handfuls of pain pills every day. And I played in an era where we practiced hard. That mentality, that Bear Bryant mentality, that Junction Boy mentality, where if you don't practice hard, you're not going to play hard. And a lot of the injuries that we sustained back in the decade that I played were in practice. It always blew my mind that they had that mentality to treat their greatest commodity as a team, which is their players, like that. But that's the way it was back then. And, I was willing to do whatever I had to stay out on the field. And that meant taking handfuls of pain pills every day and practicing through the injuries or playing through the injuries. Because, if you ever got the reputation of always being in the training room or always missing practice or always being on the injury report, then you were sure to have a short NFL career. And I was determined not to let that happen. And I was determined not to let anybody else in my position. So, that's how the addiction started. And of course, it went for another 8 years as while I was a member of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And, it took 20 years plus after that for me to finally raise my hand and ask for help. And, there was a series of bottoms that I had to hit, during that process. And, I knew that there was a lot of other guys out there sick and suffering just like me. And because of pride, ego, guilt, shame, whatever it was, wouldn't put their hand up and ask for help. And usually it was because they didn't think there was any resources available for them. And these are guys that I played with and against. So, once I got myself squared away and worked on myself for a while, then, I started reaching out to all these guys and sharing my story and tearing down the stigma that's associated with addiction and mental health issues. And guys started coming out of the woodwork. And, that was the beginning of ProAthletesInRecovery.org.
I think that's extremely important there, Randy. A lot of times we tend to shame people. We tend to shame athletes for having struggles. I remember, like we were talking before the program, I tried to instill is that I'm not going to shame nobody. The whole point, I think, of the community is to bring people together. And so when your inspiration and your story, like what is the main factor you kind of see in athletes today? Because athletes are getting better faster, they're having longer careers, but what do you kind of see as a stepping stone to to be able to continue to obviously be a huge role model and inspiration in the sports world?
Well, and let me start by saying that addiction is the great equalizer. It does not discriminate whether you're a former professional NFL player or anybody else. It brings us all to the same place. And, getting guys to raise their hand and ask for help, it's like that warrior mentality that we have. We were raised that way by our fathers because that's how our fathers were raised, where big boys don't cry, you suffer in silence, you pick yourself up, dust yourself off and get back in the huddle, that kind of mentality. And, that's been the biggest thing, that pride and ego, that guilt and shame that I've had to overcome as far as getting guys help or the resources that they need. And, but I've been pretty successful at it. Usually guys just want to hear somebody else that are struggling with the same issues they are. People ask me all the time what I miss most about football. And it's not the game. I don't miss the game. I miss the locker room. I miss that camaraderie. And that's what guys are looking for. They're looking for that camaraderie that they once had, that somebody who can identify with the fact that, they were so-and-so, the professional football player, they identify with that uniform, with that playbook, with that itinerary. And to have somebody else go through what they're currently going through is a big relief for them. And it's easy for them to put up their hand and ask for help then.
You mentioned, I guess, the great point of the locker room, the brotherhood. We kind of, you've obviously experienced something that obviously I just see as a fan. Like, what is it about, as yourself, obviously you played, you've inspired people. I'm not a player, but just seeing like what you've done has been really interesting, even though I don't have the athlete's perspective. But what is it about that brother and camaraderie in football that is probably a little bit different to like basketball or other sports out there?
Well, obviously it's a different sport. And, being with people that have laughed and cried and bled and been through the same things that you've been through, having that brotherhood and knowing that everybody went through the same thing. I mean, I can remember back when Coach Perkins came in and we had 3-a-days, which is absolutely unheard of in professional football. But again, that was that Bear Bryant junction boy mentality where if you don't practice hard, you won't play hard. And, I can remember being with guys that went through that era. And, we were so close because we suffered together for so long, that 4 years of 3-a-days during training camp. So, it's just being with like-minded people who have been to the same places that you've been. And even in recovery right now, my new tribe is my new locker room, people that have like-minded people who have been to the same places, the same deep, dark, ugly places that addiction takes you. And I love being with those people that are clean and sober and in recovery now.
Mental health, I feel like nowadays is starting to take more seriously in the NFL. But I see some kind of people not necessarily pushing back, but saw some broadcasters like Dak Prescott's been very vocal. You've seen like Hayden Hurst and so many others. Like, what do you think is as yourself who's made that, I feel like, more acceptable to talk about in the league? Like, what do you think is the biggest reason why, like, people are starting to talk a little bit more about mental health and struggles on and off the field?
Well, I think it's gotten easier. People like me, people like, Simone Biles and, the different athletes that are coming out now. I think it's easier because my message has always been that it's okay to not be okay, but you got to raise your hand and ask for help. I think the message is easier to buy into now because of the fact so many people are talking about it. There's so many people that struggle with mental health issues or even addiction issues, especially after they lose that uniform or after they lose that race car or after they lose that horse, because I work with all those guys, NASCAR, jockeys, everybody else. And, that's their whole identity. And it's like they have to grieve the death of that person in order to move on in their life, to reinvent themselves, to find their new identity, to have any self-esteem and everything like that. So, I think it's easier now to say, hey, you know what, I've got an issue. It's easier now to raise your hand and ask for help because of all the people that have come out and started talking about it. And, I face that challenge every day in tearing down the stigma that surrounds addiction and mental health, because sometimes that keeps people from raising their hand and asking for help. That keeps families from raising their hands and asking for help for a loved one, So that's my challenge every day. That's why I come on podcasts like this. That's why I tell my story, is to tear down that stigma and make it easier for people to say, hey, I'm struggling too. I need help.
I believe we as fans, and obviously yourself as an athlete, have a different perspective. Like I said, I think we talked a little bit before the program, was that we just see them as sometimes as fans as just as athletes. And what do you think is the continued breakdown of, hey, like, what can fans do to bring more awareness, or maybe other people can bring more awareness that, hey, outside of this athlete, there's like 3 to 4 years potentially for an NFL career. Like, what is, the biggest stigma? Like, what can other people do to be like, hey, I understand they have 1,500 yards, they're a phenomenal player, but after the league, like, how has that changed from athletes, necessarily back then to now in terms of after their career?
Well, and they might be a fantastic athlete and have 1,500 yards and all that, but they're still human. They still have human issues. They still have families, and they're going through things. Even though they're a great athlete and they perform well on the field, and you love them, and they're on your fantasy league and all that stuff, they're still humans that have human issues. So, I think, sometimes I wonder if fans don't realize that these guys are human, that they're just men, with families, with wives, with children, with grandchildren, and they struggle with the same issues every day that everybody else does, whether they're gaining 15,000 yards or 1,500 yards a year or what. That's their struggle. So I think if fans could just keep in perspective that these guys are just normal people who happen to be good at football, then they're just like them. They just happen to be good at what they do, and just keep it all in perspective.
Definitely, I think I couldn't have said it any better. And I tell people, just because they have a couple of extra zeros, just because they have like a couple extra million followers on Instagram or Twitter, and we know Instagram can be Instagram, they are people at the end of the day. You speak of emotions. I know this is probably a special place in your heart, though. 1983, you get to that second round. Like, we see, like, the NFL draft, it sounds cool, but from a player's perspective, I just find it very interesting. Obviously, I'm not a player. Like, what was that like? You get the call, you're being drafted, you get drafted to Tampa Bay. Like, what is that? Like, what are, those emotions, or what was that like for you on that day?
Oh my God. Me and my wife, because I got married after my junior year in college, and me and my wife were sitting by a telephone just waiting for it to ring. Obviously it's changed so much now. Now they have private jets and big productions, and they bring people in to wherever the draft site's at. But back then, man, it was just you sitting by a telephone waiting for that call. And, I can remember getting that call from Coach John McKay and hearing his cigar-stained voice going, "Hey, Randy, we just drafted you in the second round. I'll see you tomorrow," And I'm like, whoa, and then he hung up. And I'm like, whoa, wait, Coach, where's Tampa? Because I was sitting in a one-bedroom efficiency on the campus of Baylor University with my wife. And, my life changed in a matter of seconds. And, of course, I had dreamed of Dallas Cowboys. You know, I was a Texas boy, so I had dreamed that the Cowboys would draft me, but it didn't work out that way. And, you know, I was excited to go to Tampa. Matter of fact, I was an East Texas kid who had never even seen the ocean. So to be drafted by Tampa and to be moving to the seaside community of Tampa, Florida, and starting our family, starting our lives together, starting my career in pro football, we were excited, man. We loaded up everything in a small little U-Haul that we had. That was all we owned. And we hooked it up to our Burgundy Cutlass Supreme, and out I-10 East we went. And my wife was pregnant at the time, so we were stopping like every 15 minutes. It was a miserable trip. But we were going to start our lives together in my career in pro football, and we were very excited. And if you'll remember, in 1982, the Bucs went to the playoffs. So as far as I was concerned, I was going to a playoff contender.
Definitely, that I'd love to hear that from athletes and people's perspectives. We talk about change. Obviously, the climate, like you said, the NFL is different nowadays, where mental health is being more talked about. The 80s and 90s and 2000s. What do you think is the biggest difference or maybe mistakes you see athletes make nowadays as you continue to establish of being an inspiration of hope for athletes in recovery?
Well, I mean, obviously the collective bargaining agreements have improved the game. The guys don't practice as hard as we used to. There's not as many injuries sustained during the week as there used to be. Guys are having longer careers as a result of the collective bargaining agreements that they've done. But, you know, football's football, and guys are still, well, they still have that warrior mentality like I did. They're still willing to do whatever they have to stay out on the field because, you know, nothing's changed as far as the fact that if you're not out there in your position, somebody else will be. And you don't want to lose your job as a result of an injury, you know. So that mentality still remains. I think that through the advocating that I've done over the last 13 years, I don't think that narcotics are as easily available. There's more accountability, not only to the player, but to the team and to the DEA and the different organizations that sanction that. But it still exists to some point because, listen, nobody puts more pressure on themselves to get back out on the field than the player. And if the player's not putting pressure on himself, then the coaching staff is. You know, they're putting pressure on the medical staff to get a guy ready and get him back out there. And if it's not the coaching staff, then it's the ownership. You know, why can't we get this guy back out on the field? So there's a lot of pressure that's coming on to the medical staffs of the different teams. And, you know, that's never going to change because it's all about winning.
Definitely, and obviously me being very from the 90s, my one example I could think of was Robert Griffin III back in 2012. I believe that, to me,
Baylor boy, sick 'em.
Baylor boy, yes. Obviously, as a UT fan, Baylor, you know, okay. That's another conversation for another day. That's okay.
Okay.
But I think that to me was the story that, like you talked about, where maybe he put pressure on himself, or it was the medical staff, and that I think that's extremely important, like you said, Randy, because that could literally change an entire career from a team that took him to the playoffs, was going to contend for a Super Bowl his rookie year, to now he's an announcer for ESPN. That's a great gig, but there were times in between. He got replaced by Kirk Cousins. Now he's in Minnesota. So obviously everything can change. You see, though, game-winning touchdowns, game-winning field goals. We just see it all. We see Troy Aikman. We see Joe Budden talking about the game. But despite all the glitz and glamour, in your genuine opinion, from your perspective, what are some of the biggest obstacles really athletes can face on and off the field with how sometimes fans can get a little too rowdy?
Well, and obviously the game's changed so much since I played. You know, my career was 83 to 92. I mean, now we didn't have social media back then, and now they do, so obviously that's a big factor, and people are so intertwined with your life because they can keep up with your life so easy. It's just such a different game. Free agency changed the game so much. I can remember being out on strike for 7 games back in '87. And I missed 7 game checks as a result of the strike that we were doing just to get free agency. And even though in my career I never benefited from the what we did over that 7 weeks, but I lost 7 game checks, and the game now has changed dramatically because of that. And free agency is available. There's social media. There's it's just easier to get involved with a player's life off the field. I mean, obviously you can keep up with their stats and everything else. How they're doing. Even offensive linemen have stats now, and they used to not have any at all. And they have rankings and everything else, and we didn't have any of that back in the '80s and early '90s. So it's easier to keep up with a guy, to get involved with them, to know more about their family, their wives, their children, what they do, what they like, where they go in the off season. And I just think guys have to be more careful now of the image that they portray out there. I think for the most part, most of them do a great job, but you just got to be careful all the time, because there's some crazy people out there.
Definitely seen some crazy athletes or teams being desperate to sign a certain player. But definitely love hearing about your career. What also strikes me with Athletes in Recovery, obviously continuing strong, started in, I believe, January of 2012. For the viewers that are watching, people that are going to check this out, how can we help spread awareness or help out to help grow this program?
Well, and Athletes in Recovery started as a vehicle between the player that's struggling and suffering and resources. Back when I came into treatment, September 22nd of 2009, there was nothing out there for former NFL players. So the NFL formed the Player Care Foundation, and I started working with the Player Care Foundation, reaching out to these guys that were out there struggling, and it was a huge success. Little did I know that Major League Baseball would get involved, the NBA, NHL, pretty much every organization out there, from NASCAR to jockeys to golf to tennis. Every organization or every sport out there that has an organization that supports their former players, I work with them, because listen, we all have the same issues. We all have that, I call it transitional trauma, when we don't have that uniform anymore, or that car to drive anymore, or that horse to ride anymore, or that club to swing anymore. We struggle with who we are, and we self-medicate. We self-medicate those feelings. I mean, we all have chronic pain. We all have different issues because of the sport that we played. So, that's what ProAthletesInRecovery.org is all about. It's that bridge between the player and resources. And not everybody needs substance abuse help. Some guys are just struggling with depression, or bipolarism, or general anxiety disorder, things like that. So, we identify what it is, the problem or the athlete's struggling with, and we get them to the appropriate facility. And, it's crazy that, I feel like God was preparing me all those years of my addiction to painkillers. I feel like God was preparing me to do the work that I do now and help the people that I help now, because I don't just work with athletes. I work with their families. I work with anybody, that's struggling with addiction or mental health issues. But it's funny how God has used that as a way to keep me connected to a game that I love so much.
Love the part how you say a lot of people out had some amazing interviews, but the part that you said that God used me. That's the part that is really awesome, which more people kind of understand because you just never know how God's going to use you. From one, open up my own daycare to having the honor and privilege to interview a ton of people. But you can always let us know, reach out to anybody here at iCenter, whatever we can do. Obviously, our perspective and stuff is maybe not the same resources, but whatever way we can help out or spread awareness on social media, we can definitely do that without a doubt.
And whether it's an athlete or not, I mean, we're going through an epidemic right now. You know, we're losing an entire generation of young people right before our eyes with all the fentanyl and everything that's out there and the overdoses that are going on. You know, I can remember I was the captain of the Bucks for 8 years of my career there. So I would always be at midfield at the coin toss. And I can remember standing out there and looking at what 72,000 people in one place look like. You know, we weren't a great team back then, but we always sold out. Tampa was a great place to come take your shirt off and drink beer for a football game. And, you know, I would stand there and look around at how awesome that was. And that was just 72,000 people. You know, now the overdose total is up around 110 or 120. There's not a stadium in the country that holds that many people. And that's what we're up against. And you know, a lot of it has to do with the stigma surrounding it. And it's just a matter of getting out and educating people, educating communities, educating families, because we're not going to arrest our way out of this. We're not going to legislate our way out of this, but we can educate our way out of this. And the more I get in front of people, the more that I talk about it, the more that we have this conversation, the more lives will be saved.
Love having these conversations. We have Marion Barber that just passed away, Vincent Jackson last year, and even more people that we don't know, but I believe that's exceptionally important though. But ladies and gentlemen,
just last year, you know, two of my former Buccaneers, like you said, Vincent Jackson and Keith McCants, you know, they both passed away as a result of addiction, substance abuse. And so this is real. I mean, this is very real. Those were two former first-round picks, I think. Vincent was a first-round pick.
I believe he was, because didn't he get drafted by San Diego, then he got traded to Tampa Bay, I think? I could be wrong.
Yeah, I think so. But, you know, just the fact that those both happened, former Buccaneers, right here in my hometown of Tampa, you know, that's crazy. And we're not even talking about, we haven't even mentioned Tyler, the pitcher, baseball pitcher, Tyler. I'm
trying to remember.
Oh, my God. You know who I'm talking about, though.
Yeah.
And, I mean, so this is such a relevant topic, and even though we're talking about athletes, we're really talking about everybody in the community. And I live in Hillsborough County, right here in Florida, and you know that's the epicenter of this opioid epidemic that's going on. And golly, man, we've got so much work to do to try to save as many lives as we can.
Definitely, that's why we would whatever we can do. But you're in the perfect place, though. You talk about selling out back then. Y'all got the greatest quarterback that I've lost money out of my bank account for betting against him. But one last question that obviously I totally appreciate your time. You have Tom Brady coming back. Obviously, you play. You have that perspective of protecting the quarterback. You have like seeing guys play on the field. How do you feel about the Bucs this year now that Tom Brady is officially unretired?
Well, and when he first got here, you know, I kind of wondered how much gas he still had in the tank. You know, I knew that he had the experience, and but how much physically did he have left to give to football? And man, did he ever surprise me? And you know, the greatest thing, I mean, Tom is a great athlete. He's a great leader. But the biggest thing that he brings to the Bucs is that I can win attitude, you know, that the game is never over attitude. and it's shown the years that he's been here. That's the biggest contribution that he's made to this young Buccaneer team, is that the game's never over attitude. And I know as an offensive lineman, when you go back to that huddle after every play, you want to look in the eyes of a confident leader, a confident quarterback, somebody who's got the game under control, somebody that's not rattled, somebody that's unshakable. That's who you want to go back to the huddle and look at. And that's what Tom is. That's what Steve DeBerg was. That's what Vinny Testaverde was. Those are those leaders that are unshakable. The game's never over. Don't stop fighting. Give me one more play, give me one more pass, and we're going to win this thing. And man, that's I got to give him credit for being as old as he is and still playing at the level that he is. But the fact that he is such a leader of young players, I can remember when I first got to the locker room in Tampa, my locker was right next to Leroy Selman. And I can remember what a huge influence he was on me and how I learned so much about being not only a man on the field, but a man off the field. And, that's what Tom Brady brings to this young Tampa Bay Buccaneer team.
Definitely. I think my bank account is still crying in tears after the 2017 Super Bowl. My first couple of sports bets, but I can admit, though, only big reason why I'm a Tom Brady fan now, not because of the rings, is because he proved me wrong so many times. I can't bet against him. And anybody that still does, I can't do it. I can't do it, Randy. It's just
people never learn, do they? They never learn. They have to find out the hard way.
Definitely. But without further ado, let's go into this morning's or afternoon's final thoughts. Randy, we definitely appreciate everybody here at ICE and, of course, the John ALLCORN Show for taking time every day to kind of truly go in depth. But is there anything out there you want to keep the viewers and people updated on as you're continuing to be a positive impact in people's lives?
Well, first of all, stay in touch with me. You can find me at proathletesinrecovery.org. Obviously, I'm on all the social media. Twitter and everything else at Sober Center 60. But also, I can't stop without promoting my book. Go find my book on Amazon. Go to Amazon.com. Look for Off Center, the book, Randy Grimes, or just go to Randy or go to offcenterthebook.com. And it'll take you to a link there. And this only came out. I released this book at Super Bowl, February the 8th. And it's a story of my football. It's a story of my addiction, and it's a story of my comeback. And my whole family had a platform in it. It was a healing process for us. Mm-hmm. But there's something in this book for everybody. There's anything related to addiction. There's that angry person, that codependent. There's that one that doesn't believe it's a disease, it's a moral failing. It's everybody is in this book, and I'm so proud of it. It's been so successful. So you can help me by reading the book and then keeping up with me on social media as well.
For sure, I'll make sure once this live broadcast is ended, I'll make sure to put that in the description and kind of share that with people, because it's definitely fun to hear about people's stories and how we need more positivity already in the sports world nowadays, where some people are just here to bring each other down. I think the whole point, folks, the goal of our podcast, I don't speak for other people's podcasts, is regardless of where you are in life, you more than happy to come on, more than happy to agree to disagree. Like the whole point, say in the trailer, is to bring people together closer through the world of football, regardless if somebody is a Raiders fan or a Steelers fan, because I'm a Bengals fan, but that is definitely okay. Randy Grimes, CEO and founder of Athletes in Recovery, Tampa Bay, John ALLCORN Show. We will see y'all next time.
works harder, this guy is a future superstar in the media business. Keep up the good work, man. I like your style.
You have a gift. And with great power, there must also come great responsibility.
This is the way.
Long have I waited.